House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business. Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We've got a great show coming up for you. Live sports are back, but some leagues are doing better dealing with the coronavirus than others. The bubble leagues seem to be doing great. However, Major League Baseball and college football still seem to have some issues. What's that mean for daily fantasy players and sports bettors? Well, I'm going to ask our guest coming up that exact question. You know him from Rotogrinders, scoresandodds.com, and heard him on SiriusXM. We're going to talk all things daily fantasy and sports betting with Dan Bach. So stick around. We'll be right back with House of Cards.
Money matters. Money always matters. If you owe thousands in back taxes to the IRS, how much can Tax Solutions Now save you?
I paid less than I owe.
That's right, money matters. So call Tax Solutions Now and get the IRS off your back. Since 2014, Tax Solutions Now has been a leader in the tax resolution industry. That's why we say money matters. Remove wage garnishments, property liens, fines, and penalties. Qualify for the Fresh Start program or even uncollectible status. Money matters. How much can Tax Solutions Now save you?
I owed the IRS over $10,000. I paid a fraction of what I owed.
Call now to reduce or even eliminate your back taxes.
We were being audited. We couldn't sleep. We called Tax Solutions Now.
I called Tax Solutions Now and got the IRS off my back. Thanks. You saved us a ton of money.
Money matters. How much can Tax Solutions Now save you? Call now and find out.
Call 800-297-9788. 800-297-9788.
Psst. Yeah, you. Come here. Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore.
Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here. Use offer code SPICE404. They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Where was the house? Where was the House of Cards?
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. Live sports are coming back with some leagues more successful than others. What does this mean for fans of daily fantasy sports and sports betting? Well, that's what I want to ask our next guest. You know Dan Bach from Rotogrinders. You know him from scoresandodds.com, and you also know him from SiriusXM. There's no better person to ask about this subject than Dan Bach, who is on the line with us right now. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Dave, thanks so much for having me. Love talking daily fantasy sports betting, and it's great with sports back, and now we can play these games. So exciting times.
Yeah, I got to ask you, you have a long history with daily fantasy sports, and you know the sports betting industry very well. I mean, you've seen the court cases. You saw the controversies that both these businesses have gone through. Has COVID, in your opinion, been the most challenging time for both these industries?
I don't think so. I think clearly the most challenging time for certainly DFS, and I think it's they've become the leaders in sports betting. Clearly goes back to when there was a big push to just get rid of daily fantasy sports. We saw New York end up coming out with their attorney general opinion. A lot of other states followed suit. I mean, it was literally on the brink of this entire industry that was built from nothing to become a billion-dollar industry with billion-dollar companies, and it nearly went down in about 2016. And the entire sports betting landscape looked very differently if that took place, because FanDuel and DraftKings, the fact that they were able to survive that, and their businesses continued to move on, they branded themselves. I mean, that's the main reason why they are the leaders right now in sports betting in this country. And if that went the other way, if New York came out and said, nope, we're not going to change the law, we're not going to bring daily fantasy back, I think sports betting here in this country would look very different than it does right now.
For me, like a lot of people, Rotogrinders is the place to go for fantasy sports, and you're such an integral part of Rotogrinders, and I want to get your take on the industry itself right now. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in the daily fantasy sports business and the sports betting business, and they all acknowledge, right now is a very tough time. But, there's going to be a time when all the live sports comes back, and every person that I've talked to said when live sports comes back, that's going to be an incredible time for the industry. It's going to be an amazing time when all professional and college sports are going to be being played, and it's just going to have a resurgence that this industry has never seen before. Okay, well, live sports are back. Has the return of live sports been what the daily fantasy sports companies were hoping for, or were they expecting too much when I was talking to them a couple months ago?
Yeah, I think it's kind of back to where it was, and maybe even a little bit greater than it was pre-COVID. And I think a big part of that is certainly we want something to entertain ourselves, and that's where daily fantasy is a great escape. And if you look at a lot of other sports like golf, for example, which didn't have nearly as long of a hiatus, they ran, first place $1 million tournaments in DFS golf for random tournaments that would never have had such a thing. So I think it's actually really given them a platform to expose different sports, different games, that people normally wouldn't have played. NASCAR is another example of that. They've had bigger pools than they've ever had for that. And then when MLB and NBA has come back, you look at $1 million prize pools every single night. Things are rolling really, really well right now. So I think daily fantasy, it's an interesting stage, though, because, you have your two big leaders in FanDuel and DraftKings. And the biggest difference we've seen is, I think a lot of businesses are not trying to compete with them in terms of game style any longer. So now you've got things like Monkey Knife Fight and Prize Picks and Underdog Fantasy who are trying to get into this space, but they're doing it with, player prop type games, which still kind of fall into that fantasy definition, but legal definition, but are very different than the games that FanDuel and DraftKings offer. And it's a smart move. I mean, those two have killed any sort of major competition that's come into DFS. And I think people finally wised up and said, hey, we need to get more creative in the type of games that we're offering. So, that's kind of been exciting to see over the last, year or so, is to see some of these other companies start, raising capital and becoming more of a player in DFS, but not necessarily a quote unquote true competitor to FanDuel and DraftKings.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, a couple of weeks we had Bill Asher on from Monkey Knife Fight, and, he took the time to make new partnerships to get approved in different states. He really used this shutdown in a very effective way. I mean, In your opinion, did this shutdown reset the market when it comes to daily fantasy sports? Or, as you said, it's going to be FanDuel and DraftKings in the traditional daily fantasy sports model, and then everyone else? And did this pandemic give a chance for the smaller person to create new and different types of fantasy sports?
I think that they probably had that opportunity whether COVID happened or not, simply because even though I don't know that they'll say they're not competing against FanDuel and DraftKings, I don't think they're competing for the same type of customers, FanDuel and DraftKings. I mean, basically a site like Monkey Knife Fight is you're playing against the house versus playing against other people, which is a huge difference. And I think there's a great market for it. And I think there's a definitely, more upside potentially for them as operators to grow quicker because of that model. But I also feel like, FanDuel and DraftKings have a pretty good thing going right now, and I don't really see them making a pivot into that side of the business. So I think they're smart going the route that they did, but I also don't know that, COVID really made too much of a difference for it. If anything, it gave them an opportunity to, like I say, raise some capital, make those partnerships. I just saw Monkey Knife Fight had one with the Tampa Bay Bucks come out just a couple of days ago. So, there's a lot of movement there. And, that site in particular is definitely trying to raise their national awareness, which is something that, a lot of daily fantasy sites usually don't have the capital to do. So, kudos to them for being able to do that.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Credit card debt can ruin your life. If you owe $10,000 and minimum payments are siphoning away your paycheck each month, you can get debt-free in less time than you think.
I've paid $800 a month for the past 3 years and haven't changed the balance on my credit card.
Get Debt-Free Now has a program to reduce your debt, stop the harassing phone calls, avoid financial ruin, and settle for less than you owe.
I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
You're pre-approved for our special hardship program if you owe $10,000 or more. Upon payment of your new lower balance, your debt will finally shrink until you are debt-free.
My family no longer has 30 years of payments ahead of us at 20% interest.
There's no fees until you see results. So call now, make one monthly program payment, and free up your cash. Resolve your debt.
Call 800-515-1558. 800-515-1558.
You're listening to House of Cards.
I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
No way.
I'll give you 3-1 odds.
No.
5-1.
No.
10-1.
You're on.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Dan Bach from Rotogrinders, Better Collective, and Sirius XM Radio. Since live sports started, it seems like the bubble leagues are doing the best, that being the NHL and the NBA. I mean, the last couple of times I made a daily fantasy lineup for baseball, I had to replace all the players, and the games were postponed, and I kind of eventually stopped playing fantasy baseball until everything settled down. Are the fantasy players playing more NHL and NBA contests because those are the leagues doing better handling the safety procedures? Or, is it doesn't matter. People are still playing MLB, even though there are some postponements and delays and things like that.
Yeah, I think with DFS, the way the habits work of the daily fantasy player is you play with the games that have the biggest prize pools. And, NHL right now, it's always been a niche sport. I think it's going to continue to be more of a fringe fantasy sport. The people who love it. But it's hard to get casuals over because there's a lot of players that they can't pronounce their name. They don't know the game that well. But a sport like the NBA, which is, especially now in this bubble, every game is seemingly on television. I mean, that's really the true driver, I think, is the size of the actual contest, and then can you actually watch these contests? And that's one little issue with baseball is that you can't watch all the games because, ESPN or MLB Network might be showing one game a night, where NBA in this bubble, especially for the playoffs, it's amazing. Games start at 1:30 and will go all the way until about 11, 12 o'clock at night, and you get to watch every single game. You get to sweat every single basket, every point, every assist. And I think that's what people like to do with daily fantasy. They love to have a rooting interest in these games that are on their television. They're giving them, a sweat. And I think the NBA, more so than any other sport, it allows that. And then I also think that's why golf is definitely increased as well. You could stream players in the early rounds, the weekend action. You pretty much can watch golf all day. And I think that's a big part of the reason why that sport has really done well recently in DFS in terms of rise in popularity. So I think a lot of it has to do with where you can watch it and where you can sweat it. And there's nothing better than NBA.
It's amazing how big golf has gotten for both daily fantasy and sports betting. I have never seen anything like this emergence of golf in both these industries. Yeah, and I think golf is just on the brink of taking off because, especially when it comes down to sports betting, the thing about golf, which is just set up so perfect for, is live betting because unlike the NBA where you have constant action, even the NFL, you get a couple of seconds in between plays, but for the most part, it's pretty quick. Golf, you've got a full 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 minutes in between shots where the sports book should be able to have the opportunity to set up new odds in terms of, is the guy going to birdie the hole? Is he going to bogey the hole? Is he going to hit the fairway? I mean, there's a lot of betting options for golf that aren't even in existence right now. And I know the PGA Tour has made some partnerships. I know they're in with DraftKings, and we're seeing more of that marketing within the broadcast. And I know they realize that fan engagement is just going to drive more people to their sport, and there's really nothing more engaging than sports betting. So they're bullish on it as an organization, and, I can't really wait to see that kind of even grow more. I mean, I think the awesome thing is going to be the first time that you can actually stream, the golf match on your sports betting app, like you can do with tennis. I know up in Europe, that's a very popular thing. Soccer, they have that set up. I think with golf, with live betting, to be able to bet right on your app while you're watching it is just going to be a huge moneymaker. We're probably a couple years away from that actually happening, but I think it's going to happen, and I think it could really change the way that people consume that sport, and I'm excited to see it. Now, recently an issue has come to light that has to do with taxing daily fantasy sports companies. A memo from the Internal Revenue Service stated that the federal excise tax that applies to sports betting also should apply to daily fantasy sports. It's just a memo right now. There's nothing moving legislatively, but what could something like this do to the daily fantasy sports industry? Yeah, this would be something that wouldn't be good because from my, non-legal angle, but I read about this stuff all the time, this isn't just like an extra tax on profits for FanDuel and DraftKings. This is something where they would have to be paying taxes on all the entry fees that these players pay in. And you're talking hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars that people are putting on these sites that would suddenly be taxed that currently there's no tax associated with. And that is a lot of money. So typically the rake on a contest
is anywhere from 10% to 15%, and on the higher end it can get up to 20%. And I mean, there's going to be a massive trickle down to the player if this happens. It's already very difficult to be a profitable daily fantasy player, but if the rake gets over 20% because these sites have to pay this extra fee, this extra tax, it's going to hurt as a player. I don't think it's going to destroy the industry by any measure, but I definitely think it's going to be something that's passed along. And as somebody who plays the game, I'm certainly worried about it. But listening to Jason Robbins talk about this just the other day, it seems like they're ready to fight it. But I mean, this whole thing though just reeks. Like I don't understand it, because daily fantasy isn't new. Like if this memo came out in 2016 when FanDuel and DraftKings were on every commercial, and the AGs came out and said, we don't know what this is, we think it's gambling, and then they came out with this memo, it would have made sense. But DFS has been around, has been taxed both by the players and the operators for over 10 years. And just conveniently right now, this memo comes out. It also happened to come out on the day of DraftKings earnings. I think there's greater political motivations behind it. Obviously, just my opinion, nothing to back it up. But it's clear what's happening is FanDuel and DraftKings are dominating the sports betting market, and you've got a lot of casino operators who are not happy about it, who they looked at this as our opportunity to become leaders, but they were beaten to the punch because FanDuel and DraftKings were able to brand themselves through daily fantasy, and they're upset about it. And it wouldn't shock me one bit if, that's part of the reason that this IRS memo came down, because the timing of it is really, really strange.
How much of a chilling effect could that have on the growth of daily fantasy sports? I mean, we were just talking about Monkey Knife Fight. I mean, they're a new player in this field. Certainly, DraftKings and FanDuel could absorb some of this tax and things like that. But how about these new companies emerging? How much of a chilling effect could this have?
I actually think it's not a killer for those type of sites, mainly because the way they operate games is so much different than the way FanDuel and DraftKings does, because again, they're kind of house-based prop games as opposed to pooled contests like FanDuel and DraftKings do. I mean, Monkey Knife Fight is not drawing $3 million in one sort of game. They don't have that sort of liability, and neither does DraftKings. But DraftKings does collect $3 million to go towards one particular contest, and suddenly you've got to be paying on that $3 million. So I think this is something that, the smaller sites actually, it's not going to hurt them nearly as much, because again, I think they've got I don't want to say bigger edge, but the way that it's set up, I think they can be a little bit more profitable with them, being house banked games, but they're not dealing with the lower margins that FanDuel and DraftKings are. So I think they'll be okay. I don't think it really hurts them. This is, in my estimation, something that's clearly pointed at the two big players who have, upwards of $1 billion on their site in a single year, and know that that's a hit to those guys. And I think in terms of the growth of the industry, I definitely think it would hurt, because the one thing is, as rate goes up, the ability to become a profitable player and win goes down. And we've seen the stats already show most people lose in DFS. That's nothing new. But in the handful of games that are out there that, have decent rate that you can grind profits, that's going to be even tougher. So I could see certainly people getting frustrated, losing their money faster, and saying, heck, I'm done with this. And, I think the real question then comes is, what effect does sports betting have on DFS? And, that's an interesting conversation in its own right.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Getting my kids ready and driving them to school.
But a careless driver can change your life in an instant, and insurance companies want to settle on the cheap. Auto Accident Help Desk connects victims with powerful lawyers. They fight for you.
I called Auto Accident Help Desk and got help for my pain and suffering.
Don't let an insurance company take advantage of you. Our attorneys fight and beat big insurance every day. If you've been injured in an automobile accident in the last 6 months, you owe it to yourself to make this free call with no obligation.
When I called, they asked me a few questions and matched me with a powerful lawyer who knew how to fight for me.
Call now. We're available 24/7 to help you get the money you deserve for your pain and suffering.
They got me way more than the insurance company offered.
Auto Accident Help Desk helps accident victims like you every day.
Call 800-613-4611. 800-613-4611. 800-613-4611.
Hey, this is Dave Weishottle from House of Cards with your House of Cards gaming report for the week of August 31st, 2020. Wynn Resorts has very quietly gone live with an online casino and an online sportsbook in New Jersey. In order to be licensed in New Jersey, Wynn struck a deal with Caesars Entertainment in order to launch in the Garden State with its online casino. This is new for Wynn since its only other online presence is a sportsbook in Nevada and an app which has free-to-play mobile slots. The Kentucky Lottery has launched a new game based on live horse racing. The game, called Win, Place, and Show and created by Equilottery Games, allows the player to purchase a ticket with randomly selected horses from a particular race. Cash prizes are determined by the sales of the day, the race, and the order of the horses that finish the race. And finally, businesses around the country are feeling the effect of a coin shortage, and casinos in Nevada that have coin-operated slots are really feeling the pinch. One of those casinos is the El Cortez in Vegas. In July, the property ordered $30,000 in quarters from the bank, but only $500 in quarters were delivered. The casino has since removed a 5% fee from its coin counting machines to help with keeping more coins on the property. We are living in weird times. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on Twitter at HOC Radio.
You're listening to House of Cards. Check out our website at houseofcardsradio.com.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishottle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Dan Bach from Rotogrinders, Better Collective, and Sirius XM Radio. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. It seems like once again people are twisting daily fantasy together with gambling. But, I mean, you have a perspective where you know both industries very well. I mean, I know people who play daily fantasy who don't sports bet. I know people who sports bet who don't play daily fantasy. Should these two entities be treated as two separate entities instead of mixing them up into one overarching gambling theme?
Yeah, I personally think they should, because I do think there's something to be said, peer versus peer versus, peer versus house. And that's the biggest difference, especially for the mainstream sites like FanDuel and DraftKings, where I'm not competing against DraftKings. I'm competing against the 150,000 other people who are playing in this same contest against me, or the one other person I'm playing in a head-to-head contest, or 9 other people I'm playing in a 10-man contest. I view that very differently than, making a wager. And not that there's not both skill-based, because they absolutely are. There's no question about it. But I've always gone back to this point is if I totally at random decided to pick a daily fantasy team, closed my eyes, picked players, and then entered it into a contest, there is more than likely I'd say like a 95% chance that team is going to finish in the bottom 1%. If everything was selected at complete random, where if I make a sports betting pick completely at random, over the course of enough bets, that's going to land at about 45%, because the way that these lines are set up, they're so efficient. So I think like the skill aspect of DFS has been proven over time that there are extremely skillful players who make a lot of money, who put in a lot of time and can beat their opponents. And yeah, there's people who can beat sports betting. There's no question about it. but you're also talking about, again, a smaller number, and the lines are just so efficient that, again, if I did a random picking of DFS, could I win 45% of my contest, even if it was like a 50-50 type game? There's no chance of that. So for me, I view them incredibly different. And I think that's one thing that, I think a lot of people who are in sports betting look at it and say, it's gambling. You're putting money in, you're getting money out. That means it's gambling. But the skill aspect, and I'm not saying that betting's not skillful. I'm just saying that it's very different with DFS than it is with sports betting. And that's really why I view them in different lights.
Speaking of sports betting, you're part of a great website called scoresandodds.com. Can you tell us something about that and what people can expect when they go there?
Yeah, scoresandodds.com is a site that, we inherited when we were purchased by Better Collective, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, it seems. And we've been putting in a lot of work behind the scenes. It's kind of been a legacy site that's been around for a while. I know a lot of people who have been in sports betting and gambling for years. I'm talking, 10 plus years, have been using this site. And we're pretty excited because it's got a huge audience behind it. And, I don't want to give too much away because nothing's been launched yet, but we definitely have a few products that we're going to be rolling out here in the coming weeks and months that is going to be very new to the user over there. And the one thing, the first product I think we're going to roll out, I'm really pumped about because, from a DFS perspective and working at Rotogrinders, it's, I think part of the fun of playing DFS is doing the research and building your own lineup. Obviously at the end of the day with DFS, I can give you information, but it's still up to you to kind of decide what you want to do. Which players you want to play. You still have to build that team. Where in betting, it's really black and white. You're either right or you're wrong. There's no kind of middle ground. Like I can give you good picks in DFS and you can still build a bad lineup. So what we're looking to do on Scores and Odds is do something similar to that, where we want to give people the tools to be able to make the decision on their own. I think ultimately you're going to see more and more, pick sales as well. But, our first iteration, our first product is something that I think is very different. You don't see a lot of it in the market. And it's more or less, helping you make that decision in terms of which way you want to make a bet rather than telling you this is the bet you need to make. So be on the lookout for that. We're working hard on it. Hopefully we can have it by football season, but I just love that it's a very big departure from what you currently see in the world of sports betting. So that should be on the way at scoresandodds.com.
I want to get your take on one of the big topics that sports bettors are dealing with now, and that's what's going on in college football. I know some conferences have decided not to play. How does that affect the other conferences and their decisions on whether to go forward with the season?
College is fascinating. I am a huge college football fan, probably more passionate about that than I am any other sport. And, it's sizing up to have a lot of unknowns here. I mean, it potentially could be we have no football. It could potentially be we have football in the fall and the spring. It could be we just have football in the spring. We just have football in the fall. Honestly, the best scenario would be as if we had a fall season and a spring season. That would be an amazing scenario for the sports books, for the daily fantasy sites, if they could bring college football and the betting and the fantasy that goes along with it and run it from September all the way through March or April, whenever that season would end. That would give them a much longer runway. And honestly, I think that would be a boon to the operators. I think they would love to see something like that, because as long as there's games to be played, there's going to be handle. As long as people can watch games on television, they're going to bet it. They're going to play fantasy. Now, the real question, I think is if this fall season doesn't go or it gets cut short, what happens there? Because, college football is, I believe, number 2 behind the NFL in terms of, money bet. Are suddenly all those people who are betting on Saturdays just going to roll it into Sundays? I don't really think so. And I think it's probably too short a notice for the NFL to kind of jump in and take a lot of those Saturday dates, which they certainly would love to do. So I think that is the one thing that the sports books are not looking forward to, would be if college football doesn't happen, because I definitely think they would take a hit on it. Fantasy, not nearly as much. There's a lot of states out there like New York and Massachusetts and Tennessee where, when it was do or die time with CFS and they needed to get these laws passed, they had to basically give up college sports. That was kind of part of the deal. So you can't play fantasy in nearly as many sports with college sports as you can the professional games. So I don't think it has too much of an effect from a fantasy perspective, but sports betting would be huge. And, as somebody who loves it and being selfish, I love to see 2 seasons worth. But I still think it could go a lot of different ways. I know we're only about a month away from things starting up, but it's just kind of the times we live in. So I'm crossing my fingers we get both fall and spring football.
The first thing I thought of, I'm sitting here in New Jersey, and we have a rule where you can't place a bet on colleges or universities in your state. And, I've talked to gaming officials in Iowa and Mississippi and West Virginia, and they said, we don't have that rule because we have no pro sports. And, betting on our college teams is a big business for our sports betting industry. What do you think will happen to those states if there is no fall football? Can they survive, or make up the money through spring college football?
Yeah, everybody's going to survive. I don't see anybody going broke with no college football. Their sports books, for that matter, especially because NFL is still going to exist. That is the big elephant in the room. That's going to push the greatest amount of volume. Now, if there was no NFL and no college football, that's a super scary scenario for everyone. I don't even want to think about it. It starts scratching and itching, just in the thought of there being no football this fall. And I don't really see that happening. I think what we've seen with baseball and golf, where you've actually had a situation where, hey, golfers have tested positive for COVID. They've moved on. MMA fighters test positive for COVID. Guess what? They're not fighting, but guess the train rolls on. Baseball, yeah, you know what? We had to sideline some teams for a handful of games, but the season goes on. I think it would have to be a huge outbreak for this to slow down the NFL. I think they want to go on. I think the testing procedures they have in place are good, and I think they're only going to get better. If what we're hearing about these saliva tests, quick response, have your answer in 30 minutes to an hour. If that actually happens, that's going to be huge for all sports. Now, obviously, that's going to be quite an expense, but to be able to have tests daily that you can get quick results, I think that's really, going to be something that will ensure that we continue to see sports, because if somebody doesn't have it, as a player, they should be able to play. And I think that, that's the key here. Fans, that's a totally different story. I don't think we're going to see fans anytime soon. But I do think, these leagues, they've got a lot of money riding on this. The players themselves have a lot of money riding on this. Obviously, the professional ones, they want to play these games. They want to get those $1 million plus paychecks. So I think everybody's just got to be a little bit more responsible, and so far so good in training camp, but still a long way to go.
In terms of college football, I am fascinated to see if Nebraska and Ohio State pulls away from their conferences and plays anyway. Have you gotten any information on teams within a conference that has canceled their schedule, going off the reservation and playing wherever they want to play?
Yeah, I have. There was some speculation on Twitter, unverified sources saying that those schools were going to try and break off and do their own five-team thing. That would be very surprising to see them break ranks. I honestly think the Big Ten did it wrong. I think the Big Ten should have probably not done it by conference and done it by school and said, hey, if you don't want to play, you don't have to play. But if there's a school that would like to play, we're gonna go continue on. And that's the biggest thing. And for me, I feel like people should be given choices on these things. And there's a lot of college football players who were not given a choice. in this situation. Anybody in their right should be able to say, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to play. But what about those people who are comfortable and do want to play? They have a lot to gain, a lot to lose by not playing. And I feel like there was almost too great of an assumption that it was going to happen. And then the Big Ten and the Pac-12 said, hey, we're not going to play. And I think it kind of blindsided a lot of the players there. I'll be interested to see if players start transferring. I don't know that that's going to start happening, but I also don't know that we're going to see a spring football season. Selfishly, again, I'd love to see it, but you bring in the dynamics of amateurism, you bring in the dynamics of students on campus, and for me, that's kind of always been the thing that I didn't quite understand is, so you're not worried about COVID, but you're having kids on campus. But it's not okay for them to play football when ultimately you're going to have people in dorm rooms, you're going to have people in classes, you're going to have people obviously going out and socializing. But, football, where you have these people who are constantly being tested, who are on a set schedule, you can't continue with that. I don't quite get it. And then this talk about, hey, this is about, we don't know what the future has in store with this disease. Like there might be heart issues. Well, you just said you want to play in the spring. Are we suddenly going to have all those answers come January or February? No, we're not. So I hate that argument that there's too many unknowns from a medical side of things for us to play now, when they agreed that we want to play in the spring or the late winter time or late winter time. It doesn't make any sense. That argument holds no water because there's zero chance we're going to have long-term data on the effects of COVID come January and February. We're not.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore.
Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here. Use offer code SPICE404. They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
We like to think that we live in a nice, safe neighborhood. The truth is that a burglary occurs every 13 seconds, and homes without a security system have a 300% greater chance of getting broken into. How many homes in your neighborhood were robbed yesterday? You need to start protecting your home and family today. Call now to get state-of-the-art protection. To keep your family and property safe, call the number on your screen now. Representatives are standing by to assist you.
You're listening to House of Cards.
The answer is probably. We're finished.
What are the odds? 1 in 100?
I don't do odds. I gave very detailed
casinos, sir.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you here. House of Cards is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there's no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with Drizzly.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Dan Bach from Rotogrinders, Better Collective, and Sirius XM Radio. Well, as you said, we're coming up on the NFL season. Have you heard of any way daily fantasy or sports betting companies are approaching the NFL season? Are they doing anything differently? I mean, I have friends who play season-long fantasy who aren't playing this year because they didn't think the season's going to last, which I think is a bit extreme, but are companies approaching this NFL season any different? And what can customers expect from these companies?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be too much different because especially from daily perspective, they can be very fluid with what they do because it is a weekly type of contest. So if you're playing week 1 or you're playing Monday Night Football or you're playing Thursday Night Football, if there's schedule changes, you can accommodate those things. It's funny, one of my season-long leagues, it's kind of a keeper league, and I think that's where you're going to see, the biggest kind of changes potentially, because even my league, they came out to me and said, let's just put this season on hold and just do redraft for this year. Forget about keepers. It's going to be a crazy year anyway. Let's just do something different with it. And this is a league that's been in existence for 20 some odd years. So for them to kind of be having this attitude, they can't be alone on it. And then, the big season long NFL fantasy contest, what you're going to miss out on is a lot of these Vegas drafts. A lot of people are going out to Vegas to draft in person, and that has a huge trickle down even into sports betting, which is something I want to talk about here in a minute. But I do think like a lot of these big season long drafts, which typically are done in person, obviously aren't going to be happening. But I think an interesting effect here is I think it was the Circus Sports. They have their season-long handicapping contest out in Nevada. Yeah. $3 million, I think, is the total prize pool. And right now, we're less than a month away, and there's like $2.5 million in overlay in this contest. And I think those contests like that and the Super Contest have the most to lose here, because those contests require you to sign up in person. And they got a lot of those signups by people who are going on vacation in Las Vegas or coming in for fantasy drafts or coming in for conferences. People aren't doing those things now. People are not traveling to Las Vegas. And are they really willing to travel to Las Vegas just to, get their entry into a sports betting contest? If there's $2.5 million of overlay, darn right I'm jumping on that plane. I don't think there will be, but there certainly will be a lot. And I think like that contest in particular is one that if you're a value hunter, you live out in the West Coast, you should keep your eye on, because it wouldn't shock me one bit if there's like, upper six figures, maybe even seven figures of overlay in a contest that requires in-person registration. And also I think only has a limit of like five entries per person. So it's not like somebody can go in and get 100 of them. So that's something to keep your eye on to see what's going to happen here in the coming weeks. And it could be good value for people who can get out there.
Dan, we're running out of time, but can you give out your social media address and your website so people can follow along with what you're doing?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Dan_Bach. You spell it BACK. I know it's a little backwards, but you can find me on Twitter. Really active over there. And Rotogrinders.com. If you're into DFS or you want to try it this fall, I'll tell you what, we're the largest community, the longest running content site, out there. And then of course, scoresandodds.com is a great resource for you. Odds comparison, up to the minute scoring, play by play, and doing a lot of exciting, new sports betting projects are going to be landing over there. So you can find me in those three places, and just really excited to kind of have some football here this fall in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Dan Bach from Rotogrinders, scoresandodds.com, Sirius XM Radio, and Better Collective. Thanks so much for coming on and giving us your take on what's going on in the world of daily fantasy and sports betting. Seriously, man, come back soon and keep us filled in, because this is some great information.
Dave, anytime. Really enjoyed the conversation, and you be safe out there.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. I'll see you next time on House of Cards.
build a house of